The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution Radio. Today it is July 22nd, and joining us on our discussion is my lovely partner and co-host, Leah Shaper.
Hello.
And she's unmuted. So
I've got my mic on. I almost forgot.
Now, I had some power outages this morning here at the studio. How about you?
Yeah, I did too.
I was getting a little worried. So if we go black, you know where we're at.
Yeah.
It seems like, before we get started, that we've experienced more blackouts in good weather in recent weeks than ever before.
Yeah, especially in the last few days.
And a lot of chatter is that these are tests. They're going to start to be blacking out places in the summertime, maybe as part of the climate hysteria that's going on. I mean, you've heard of climate lockdowns, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, I just heard in recent days some wording about how we should perhaps get used to blackouts.
Yeah, I've seen that. And some states are even suggesting like periods of time where they shut the electric off to save the planet.
Right.
Just a few hours a day, everything will go dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just enough time so that the meat in your freezer doesn't thaw, and then they'll turn it back on.
Right. No, maybe it's so that the meat in your freezer does thaw and gets wasted. I don't know. Right. If you want to control people, you control their food, right? So if they have food, then you remove it from their hands so that you can only get food from the powers that be.
Yeah. So if you're wondering what we're going to be discussing today, the title of the show is Climate Hysteria.
Yeah.
I'm sure that in the last week or two, you've read headlines that are like, it's the hottest day ever, the hottest month ever, the hottest ever. We're going to go over some of the headlines. I just did a report on Oppenheimer Ranch Project on a paper that came out talking about underground climate change.
Oh, I saw this too. The deformation of underground because of global warming. Well, the other big narrative in the last week or two is this idea that it's hotter than it's been in 120,000 years.
Yeah.
So suddenly we've shifted from in recorded history, which isn't very long, to 120,000 years, which can only mean some weird amalgamation of proxy data and actual recorded temperatures, which, our modern recorded temperatures are manipulated anyway, right? We have sensors on airport runways and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the proxy data shows that it's been much warmer recently than now.
Right, so
why they go back to the last glacial cycle is ridiculous, because they talk about recorded history, which is about 60 years in most of the climate models.
Yeah.
As far as climate data. And then they look at the proxy data, but they forget the whole last 12,000 years, which most of which was warmer than now.
Right. Right.
Additionally, during the entire ice age for the last 5 million years, the planet has been warmer than now. We're going to show you all this data.
Yeah. The other thing I've been seeing a bit of recently, and I don't remember exactly what the context is, but when it's talking about recorded history, it's specifically talking about the period of time 1940 until right now, which is extremely convenient, right? Because in the United States, from 1930 to 1939, we had the Dust Bowl when it was extremely hot in the United States. So that's convenient.
Yeah, and the majority of them are using data from 1974 to present or 79 to present. They're not going back to 1940 because it was cooler back then.
Right.
They want to show this massive warming recently, and there has been warming about a half a degree in the last 100 years. But many people have been claiming it's going to be 5 degrees warmer by now. It's not. These climate models are off by a factor of 5 or 10 times in what's actually happening based on their predictions. And then the bad news is back in 2012, Obama passed the Smith Modernization Act of 2012, which allows all media a backdoor. It's free range for propaganda. And what it does is it allows for propaganda to be used by the government and for the government to put that propaganda into the mainstream through the media.
Yeah. And this works perfectly with something you just said a second ago that is kind of key here is we're looking at models, right? We're looking at models of projection. And so those models also need some analysis to know, if they actually make sense, right? Because if a model is based on a concept that isn't true, then the model isn't going to be true.
And if every year the model is updated, which they are, and you add a factor that makes it warmer, then your model is going to be warmer.
Right.
Now, here is a headline that just came out 9 hours ago. Climate records tumble. Now, this is in response to the hottest day ever, the hottest month ever that's been happening. And it says it's leaving Earth in uncharted territory.
What does that mean, that records tumble? What does that mean?
Well, I just said, in the last few weeks, it's been the hottest day ever, the hottest month ever. That's what they're referring to here. So climate records tumble, which they haven't. And it says it's leaving Earth in uncharted territory. No, it isn't.
No, clearly not.
The Earth has been warmer than now for the last 500 million years. That's not uncharted territory. That's where we've been.
Right.
Yeah, complete nonsense. And so here is one of the graphs that's been showing up on Twitter for the last 4 weeks that shows the hottest day ever. This is not based on data. This is a model. And this model comes from the University of Maine. It's insane. The University of Maine is like their climate change research is based on global warming. It's not based on climate cycles. It's not based on proxy data. It's based on the false premise that CO2 warms the Earth, which it doesn't. And so this model is based on the assumptions that the University of Maine has.
Notice also it starts at 1940 again.
This one does?
Yeah, go back up to the title, the subtitle.
Oh, yeah. Okay, this one's
1940 to 2023.
But it's not based on the measured temperatures. This is a model.
Yeah.
So all these lines were modeled based on the parameters in the model from previous temperatures, not on actual measurements. And when they show this, it says, even in the caveat underneath, it says that this data is not necessarily accurate. So why are we using it?
We're going to proclaim that it is the hottest day on record, even though we don't know if the data
isn't really accurate. All right, here's another one. The planet saw its hottest day on record this week. This was back on July 6th when they were claiming the 4th of July was the hottest day on the planet. Is that ridiculous?
Well, it's even just ridiculous in the context of, like, I know that the idea behind this is that it's a global average temperature, but like, look at what's been happening in Australia this year, right? Australians are complaining that their winter is like very snow heavy and very cold and much more so than usual. So it's like,
but it's the hottest day on the planet.
Yeah.
It's so ludicrous. Here, I'm just going to show you the last 65 million years. You can't see it if you're on the radio, but trust me. It's been 5 degrees C warmer, 12 degrees C warmer for the last 65 million years. Right. It has never been as cold as it is now. So to claim that on July 4th of this month, it was the hottest day on the planet is an absolute categorical lie. 100%. That really angers me.
Yeah.
This is CNN.
Yeah.
The fake news network.
Yeah. Well, and then it's wildly frustrating to witness other people see headlines like this and go, oh my God. And then, like, I have an old friend from the East Coast I noticed a while ago was claiming that it was like 120 degrees in California. I think this was last year. And she had to put blankets in her windows. And oh my God, there's a crisis. And it's like, oh my God, do you not know that this is in your head? It's so bizarre.
Yeah, so this is a mass brainwashing effort using propaganda.
Yeah.
And the mainstream media is complicit. And this is because of the Smith Modernization Act of 2012. We'll leave you a link below if you're going to rewatch this over at Magnetic Reversal News, where it will be shadow banned and demonetized. I guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
So here, this is coming from Forbes. July 4th was Earth's hottest day in 100,000 years. Breaking the record for a second day in a row. For 2 days in a row, it was the hottest day in 100,000 years.
This is this title, this headline is hilarious because it's basically claiming that there is a record for over 100,000 years. There is not. There's proxy data, but there is no record. So again, I said this earlier, they're combining recorded human history with proxy data.
Well, and they're lying.
But even then, it's not right.
If they're going back on the proxy data, it's 123,000 years ago. It was warmer.
Right. Well, that's typically the
number. It was still, we were in an ice age 100,000 years ago. So the number is wrong. All right.
It's way hotter than it was in the ice age. Oh my God, we're all gonna die. Like what?
And here, the ABC, as they say over in Australia, Earth reaches the hottest day ever recorded 4 days in a row. Oh my God. This June was the hottest on record, and July is getting hotter.
I mean, you would think after years of reading headlines like this that people would catch on, and I guess a lot of people have, but there's plenty of people that haven't.
Well, over the last 4 years, we saw that climate change causes everything, right? It causes obesity, it causes speeding, it causes crime, anything. It causes rain,
it's also racist.
It causes
Did
drought,
you know that?
It causes floods, it causes drought, it causes starvation, everything, locusts, anything you think of is climate change.
But climate change is also racist, didn't you know?
Yeah. And so nothing has ever happened in the past because of anything else but climate change, apparently.
Yeah.
So where does this? Well,
go back to the article about Chicago's foundations.
Yeah.
It's deforming the earth underground.
Yeah, I was watching some podcasts over and some other channels, and they pointed out this is very clearly what's happening. And we're going to get to the whole story in just a minute. So stay with us, because we're not just going to go on a tangent and show you a bunch of ridiculous headlines here. We're going to explain it. Mm-hmm. Underground climate change is shifting Chicago's foundations. The paper that was written that this is based on was from a geologist who was looking for funding.
Yeah.
This thing was happening back when I was in academia back in the 90s. The only way I could get funding is if it had to do with global warming. That was back then. That had to be in your proposal.
Yeah.
I propose that I'm going to study this thing, and no matter, then you just say, as it relates to global warming.
Right.
So here he's looking for funding, and he says, I'm going to look at the underground areas of the city as it relates to climate change. And he saw it shifting, so he just blamed it on climate change.
Yeah.
Like racism.
Right. Well, and then something like this, like a thesis like this would be relatively easy to come up with data to support your ridiculous thesis and kind of fool the masses, right? Like when we look at satellite temperature data, we're looking at ground temperatures rather than air temperatures, which is very different. You know, a ground temperature in the middle of July on asphalt is going to be way hotter than the air is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So a lot of the alarmists use climate reanalyzer, and that should just be a giveaway. The second word is reanalyzer. What are they reanalyzing? Why isn't it called climate data? Because they're manufacturing the hysteria here.
Because we're using modeling
to manufacture hysteria.
Yeah.
Now, it was back in 1968 when all this began, and it really didn't come to the forefront until the 70s. Back in 68, a group of scientists, businessmen, academics, diplomats, elites were invited by the Italian industrial Aurelio Pecci and the Scottish scientist Alexander King to a meeting in Italy. And that began the Club of Rome. You've heard of that?
Actually, no, I haven't.
The Club of Rome became famous for writing a paper in 1972 called Limits of Growth. It was published controversially, and the report pointed out in 1972, mind you, that the temperature on the planet would rise 2 degrees C by 2050. And between 2008 and 2020, the world would achieve its maximum production level according to the available natural resources. The Club of Rome warned about global alterations that would affect the whole of humankind. And guess what they were suggesting? We need less population. We need more restrictions. They need to restrict the way people travel, the way we use resources, and everyone needs to be monitored or there is going to be a catastrophe.
Yep.
And that's the beginning of where we're at.
Yep.
Queen Elizabeth dumped a huge amount of money at the time into this, and that is what set off the WEF, the UN, the IPCC, and all of this garbage science that has been building now for 5 decades.
It's almost amazing that it's taken this long, right? I mean, you can really see the results now because there's so many, there's from so many angles, there's this push to depopulate. I was thinking yesterday about, I'm remembering hearing when I was a kid about China's one-child policy, right? And like it seemed, I don't know, sort of acceptable because the population in China was really high and it wasn't here in the United States. You just sort of accepted it as like this foreign country's approach to dealing with high population. But when I think about it now, it's completely insane. And I think that we're going to run into something like that at some point in the next 20 years, or maybe earlier, where there's going to be a political push to say you can only reproduce so much.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. It's happening automatically through the poison they put in our food.
Yeah, that too.
The fact that fertility is at an all-time low. It's because of the plastics we're exposed to. Everything is wrapped in plastic. We've got phthalates. We've got carcinogens. We've got glyphosate. The list goes on and on. The food we eat is food for sheep for the most part. It's toxic and it's killing us.
Well, it's not even for sheep, frankly, because it's toxic.
Right.
It's not for anybody.
Listen to this propaganda here. One possible interpretation of the COVID-19 global drama might be that this terrible pandemic is a sort of answer from nature in the face of human inability to prevent and reduce environmental damage.
Except that it's not even from nature.
No.
Right? I mean, it's being shown again and again, and this was obvious from some preprint papers that came out early in the pandemic that this was never a natural virus. This was a lab-created virus. Of course, that preprint disappeared rather quickly because, you know, nobody wanted that truth to be out there. But as time marches on, there's more and more evidence to show that that's the case.
3 years ago, I interviewed the inventor of the term bioweapon, the policy of, what was that guy's name?
I am not remembering right now.
He's interviewed on he's been on CNN and every channel.
Yeah.
He knew it was a bioweapon the day he heard about it.
Yeah.
From where it came from what it was doing, and the fact that it's gain of function research based. The term gain of function is synonymous with bioweapon. If it's a gain of function research, that's the same as saying bioweapons research.
Well, and the evidence is also right in the structure of the virus itself. I mean, I don't know if you remember this paper, but it was written by a Indian author, and basically what they were pointing out is that there's a little section of the genome of this virus that's like a section from HIV. That like there's no way that this whole section that's like perfectly in sequence can just appear like it's like stuck in there. Like that doesn't happen in nature. But of course,
we're getting way off topic here.
Yeah, we are way off topic here.
So let's look at the climate catastrophe that's happening. You're looking at it in a graph. You can't see it at home. But what it shows is that in 1920, global deaths per year due to the climate were over 500,000. That's a lot of people dying from climate-related deaths. And as of now, look, the 2021 number is almost 0.
Yeah.
We went from 500,000 a year in the 20s to no deaths now.
You know why? Because we have air conditioning. During
this climate emergency.
Well, okay,
to get to that, air conditioning only helps save 12% of the climate deaths. The majority are from cold, which is
I was going to say, that was my next question. Does this graph include due to cold? Because we lose more people due to cold rather than heat.
Floods, droughts, storms, wildfire, and extreme temps are all on the climate chart. Wildfire's on there. You know, it's the most wildfires ever. 0 deaths.
Well, also, wildfire doesn't have anything to do with climate.
Well, it does. In times when it's hotter and drier, there's more fires.
Yes. But that's weather. That's not necessarily climate. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, climate is 15 years or more of weather. So you need 15-year droughts to really get lots of wildfires, right? You're going to create very dangerous conditions. So based on that, there is some reason to include wildfires. Here we're looking
but then of course that also demands that we look at the actual frequency of wildfires, right? Because there's always this narrative out there, oh, we have more and more and more wildfires, which isn't really true.
No, nothing is increasing. Everything that's related to climate is decreasing. Tornadoes, hurricanes, everything is decreasing in the last 100 years. We're going to show you all that if we have time to get to it, but we've only got 7 minutes here in the first half. So quickly, I'm going to show you the last 5 million years of temperature. The dotted line here that goes back to 2.5 million years. Prior to that, the Earth is warmer than today for the entire time. There's never a point it gets colder than now. But during the Ice Age, it got warm and cold about every 40 to 100,000 years. We're talking a 20-degree shift in temperature every 100,000 years or so for the last 2 million years. And so none of this is based on carbon dioxide, burning fossil fuels, and the mainstream media. How many times have we had massive global warming events in the last 2.5 million years? It's been over 100 times where the temperature goes up 20 degrees and back down. None of this is caused by man, but now the temperature's gone up 0.5 degree and it's our fault. That's how ludicrous the whole narrative is.
I have a question for you though. Where do you get 20 degrees from? Because on this graph, I'm seeing like 8 degrees max.
This is one of many different proxy datas.
Yeah.
And if you just go over to the last spike here, the Eemian spike, which is the highest spike on the far right of the graph, right there.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be 4 degrees C warmer than now. So this graph does not make any sense. Because if we go back 18,000 years ago from now down here at the bottom, that's 12 to 14 C colder than now. So the scale of the graph is way off.
Yeah.
But it does give you a good idea on the 41,000, 100,000 year cycle of climate catastrophe that happens on Earth, not because of humans. It's happening because of something else external. And then that brings us to decades of fake data. The vast majority of high quality long-term temperature data comes from the US. There doesn't exist anywhere else. In fact, much of the planet has little or no long-term temperature data. So how in the world would we know it's the hottest anything? We won't.
You know, yesterday I Googled something about the Dust Bowl era. And what immediately popped up was all of these articles from, it was like about a year ago, talking about how, the fact that it was really hot in the Dust Bowl doesn't mean anything in regard to climate change because it's completely localized. Well, I understand the difference between localized data and global average temperatures, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't negate the idea of global warming either. And especially in light of this, that most of the data was coming from the United States anyway.
Right. Yeah. So we're basing all this on US data for the most part. Right. And the hottest July ever is in the data. You can go look. Have a guess when the hottest July ever was. And it was much hotter than this July.
1936.
Yes, July of 1936, hottest July ever by a huge margin. Now, the problem with this is the fake data. What do I mean by that? Well, NASA conveniently changed the temperature record back in 2012 when propaganda became legal. Can you believe they changed it then? And here is the before and after graph, the 1999 graph and the modern graph. And the 1999 graph has the 1936 July data point on it.
This makes me so angry.
We'll come back after the break and share our anger with you.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine.
There was blood on the wire.
Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Join me on the Brian Ruhe Show on Revolution Radio, Eastern Standard Time, every Tuesday night from 6 to 8. We talk about the four most vital things, in my view, affecting all of humanity. Number one is UFOs and aliens and their agenda for the advancement of humanity. Number two is the Jewish establishment's control over all aspects of human civilization. Number three, the truth about Adolf Hitler, how he was the opposite of what we've been told. Number four is advanced ancient global civilizations. Join me on the Brian Ruhe Show, Tuesday nights from 6 to 8 on Studio B on Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And we're back with the second half of the show. We left very angry with the manipulation of data from NASA. So what are your thoughts? Why are they doing this? Why are they changing science?
Because it's a way of controlling people in the end, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I really do think we are going to run into attempts at doing climate lockdowns in the near future, which I don't think anyone's going to stand for. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, they tried that like 15-minute city in England or something and put up barriers, and they all got ripped down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that didn't go over so well.
No, I mean, and I mean, it doesn't work very well, even just from the perspective of, I was just watching one of these videos of the like Stop Oil protesters in the UK, and these regular people getting very angry with them. Partially, like in one situation, there's a woman who has a newborn baby that she needs to take to the hospital. And these people are blocking their way. She gets out, she talks to them directly, and she's like, who in the world do you think you are? Like, you get to decide who lives and who dies? Like, you know, screw you.
Yeah, these are spoiled, brainwashed children. Our whole the planet is ruined. There are millions of brainwashed, spoiled little brats. They don't know how to write in cursive. They don't know how to do anything unless they ask their square.
Yeah.
And they're completely inept. Can you imagine if the electricity goes off for a year? They're just going to cry themselves to death.
It's going to be total madness. And but this is all by design, right? You have a whole generation of people which, like you said, like they don't know anything, they don't know how to do anything. They only know how to look at their little rectangle, and they're going to be completely lost. And that is by design, because that makes them a population that is completely brainwashable, which makes them completely controllable. So, you know, screw us old fogies over here.
We're ancient.
I mean, we're not ancient, but, you know, we're middle-aged, so screw us.
Oh my God, we are? I still feel like I'm like 20.
Well, I turned 46 in 2 days.
Oh, happy birthday. We're headed out
Thank
to
you.
Mesa Verde for Leah's birthday. It should be exciting, even though it's going to be 97 blazing degrees,
Yeah.
which, by the way, is not a record at Mesa Verde. Not a record.
I was thinking over the break about the data manipulation that you were showing. You know, the different, and it like it's so infuriating, the outright lying in science. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. I at one point was doing a graduate program, which I never finished, in biomedical writing. And I was approaching this from the perspective of writing about science. And one of the things that we used to talk about a lot is that there's a real benefit to having science writers involved in the production of scientific papers. Many papers are ghost written as they are, right? They're often written by grad students. But if you have like a recognized science writer in the picture who can double check your data, double check your conclusions, it's a very good check and balance for science. Because one of the things that we looked at, I had this assignment at one point where we're actually looking at a whole bunch of abstracts on a particular topic. And the number of those abstracts that, because many scientists only read abstracts, they don't necessarily go and read the whole paper. So sometimes when you compare the abstract to the paper itself, you discover that the statistical conclusions that they're coming to are false. Therefore, the conclusions are false. But they wrote an abstract which supports a certain hypothesis that's like the narrative of the day. It's so unethical, and it happens all the time. It's like the whole scientific industry has become like junk, except for people who still have integrity and cannot be bought by funding. It's horrendous.
Yeah, let's take a look at this data set manipulation here. If you look at the right circle here, which is right around 1999, and you can see that there is a rise in temperature since the 80s on the graph. Well,
Yeah.
The reality is that this is that catastrophic rise in temperature, which shows that there is no rise in temperature. It shows back in 1998, it was warmer than today.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it shows. It shows the hottest Earth was 2016, and they're claiming that this temperature here, which is the June temperature, was the hottest ever on Earth, when clearly a few years ago it was warmer.
Yeah.
Albeit not in June. This is like a February data set. So it's like February, April, May there. But in February and April and May of 2016, it was warmer than June of this year.
I mean, you could claim in this graph, from about 2000 on to 2023, there's a slight uphill trend. You could argue that.
Yeah,
you know, if you actually did the least squares fit line and all that.
Huh? You could see that it's 0.38 degrees warmer on average the last 30 years.
Oh no! Oh my God! We're all gonna die.
And here's the headline: For Europe's older population, heat is the new COVID.
That's another thing I'm seeing a lot in the last week is this making this analogy between COVID and global warming, which tells you right there, I think you're going to try to do a climate lockdown, and I think they're going to try to do it relatively soon.
Mandates, masks, restriction of movement.
Uh-huh.
As if people in Europe have never been hot. We're about to show you how hot it has been in Europe. Extreme heat is killing more people, and the worst is yet to come. No, it isn't. It is not. According to a 2021 study published in The Lancet Planetary Health, cold is far more deadly. For every death linked to heat, 9 deaths are linked to cold. So how come there isn't a cold catastrophe movement?
Right.
Here's where it gets interesting. Ready?
I'm ready.
Where is it? I know. I should have highlighted it. Here it is. I did highlight it. Contrary to NOAA and the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics and the paper I just cited, NOAA indicates that twice as many people die of cold in a given year than of heat. So they reduce that by a huge factor because the Lancet study showed 9 deaths for cold, one for heat. And NOAA, it claims that it's just 2 to 1.
Wow.
So that's more data manipulation right there.
Well, and it's easier if you gradually change the narrative. Like, and I don't think there's even that many people that are aware of that. Then more people die of cold than heat. But if you gradually change the narrative, it becomes easier for the population to digest, generally speaking.
Yeah, 9 times more people die from cold. Here's the paper from 2021. We'll leave you a link below so you can go read it yourself. Here's some more data. This is coming from India. Deaths from extreme temperatures. Cold deaths. Just moderate and a little bit of extreme cold deaths. There are over 600,000 dead per year for cold. Guess how much for heat? Under 100,000. That's in India. India is a hot place.
Yeah.
It's not a cold place, yet 600,000 die from cold and less than 100,000 from heat in India. No one would believe that, would they? That's the data.
That is hard to accept, actually.
Because they're not telling you about the cold deaths.
Well,
They're
also, that's a huge number. That's 600,000 a year? That's huge.
They have no heat there. So when it gets cold and people are dressed in tablecloths, they freeze.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that we share stories all the time on Oppenheimer Ranch Project on when it gets cold in the mountains, all the animals die, all the people die. So let's go to a place that has heat and air conditioning. The US. Here is cold and heat deaths. You can clearly see there are almost no heat deaths in the US, but there are plenty of cold deaths, and we've got tons of wood to burn. So the facts are in. The media is full of it, and it has everything to do with Climate Reanalyzer and the University of Maine, who use manipulated data and models to fit the narrative. Oh, yeah. So let's go look at some of the, well, what do I have here? Let's talk about 1,500 years of heat waves. In 1132, not only did rivers dry up, but the ground cracked and became baked to the hardness of stone. The Rhine River in Alas dried up. Italy was visited with terrific heat in 1189. Vegetation and plants were burned up. Do we have any stories like that? I haven't seen one.
No.
During the Battle of Bella in 1200, there were more victims made by the sun than by weapons. Men fell down sunstruck in regular rows. The sun of 1277 was also severe. There was an absolute dearth of forage. And this goes on and on. We can go through thousands of examples. In 1303 and 1304, the Rhine, Louvre, Seine all dried up. In 1650, the heat throughout Europe became excessive, and Scotland suffered particularly in 1625. Men and beasts died in scores. Meat could be cooked merely by exposing it to the sun. Not a soul dared to venture out between noon and 4 p.m. In
You know,
17, and people walk around Phoenix all day and it's 118.
right. And doesn't and only cools down to about 94 at night.
And there are not scores of people dropping dead.
I mean, this also reminds me of, the thing that we hear all the time about the big lakes out here in the Southwest. Oh, they're all drying up. The levels are dropping. Well, okay, that's true. The levels have dropped at times very significantly, but a lot of that has to do with human beings pulling that water. It's not from climate change. It's from us using it.
Yeah.
Hello?
Well, back in 1718, not a drop of water fell for 6 months in Europe. That hasn't happened anytime recently, and it hasn't been in the paper. In 1753, the thermometer rose to 118 degrees in Europe. In 1799, the heat at Bologna was so great that a large number of the people died. I mean, that's not happening today.
Yeah.
Vegetables were burned up in 1793 and fruit dried on the trees. The furniture and woodworking in dwelling houses cracked and split up. Meat became bad in 1 hour.
Wow.
Jesus.
And then we see these articles about, how bad the drought is in whatever place, the Southwest or California or whatever. And it's like, yeah, do we have periods of drought here? Absolutely we do. But that doesn't mean that the whole world is burning up. It's a natural part of the cycle. And obviously it can be way more extreme than anything we've seen in our lifetimes.
Right. We're going to talk about one of those extreme periods. Actually, from September of 1895 to the summer of 1896. That's almost a year. Okay? There was an unprecedented heat wave across the entire world. This is unheard of. In India, from 1876 to 1879, 10.3 million died in Digby, 8.2 million in Maharashtra, 6.1 million in Sevoy, 19 million. According to the Lancet, from 1896 to 1902, death from heat, 20 million dead. And we showed you in India that 6 times more people die from cold. So how many were dying from cold then?
Right. You know what else is funny about this? It just occurred to me. If the elites are so focused on depopulation, and if this is what can happen when it gets truly hot, then they should be celebrating climate change, right?
Yeah, they should be. Because in China at the same time, over 20 million died, maybe 30 million. Brazil, there were millions of deaths, all from the heat wave of 1895 to 1896. And here's this is just the other day. These are the stations at 100. Well, actually, this is 2021. I thought this was more recent. But these are stations at 100 in red and above 110 in purple in 2021. But this is back in 1898. There were 100 degrees in one single day across in every state.
Yeah.
So way different during these heat waves when it's actually the whole country. So right now they're talking about a heat wave in the South. There is record cold temperatures being broken in the middle of the continent in the last week. Nobody reads about that.
Yeah. Well, and then in light of the fact that we do have a lot of temperature sensors, we have more temperature sensors now, and that a lot of them are placed in terrible locations, like at airports, where it's going to be much hotter. So in light of that, it illustrates that the severity is not nearly as much now as it was in 1898.
Or during the late 1930s. Here we can see a data set of all the climate data we have going back to 1900. And this is the percent of days above 60. And you can see there is no trend in warming. In fact, it has been cooling since the 1930s. Here's a headline from 1931. World suffers freak weather. America has drought and heat waves. Europe suffers from rain and cold spells. Indies and China hit by heavy floods. So it's like people don't realize that these cycles repeat. The flooding they're blaming in Vermont and New England and just happened in Pennsylvania. They're blaming it on climate change. And it's like as if these things have never happened in the past.
And it doesn't take that much to look backwards and see that these things have repeated. Like it's not that hard to do.
Right here. I have a picture of the same floods that just happened in New England, and this is from March 21st, 1936.
Yeah.
And look at Johnstown flood, the Potomac flooded. There's a whole city underwater.
Yeah.
Fire and flooding in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. You know, at some point
Williamsport,
they're going to have to.
Pennsylvania, Williamsport was underwater.
Yeah. At some point they're going to have to like ban the microfiche machine, right? Because that's what allows you to typically what allows you to find articles like this, right? Google can just like ban all of this stuff and take it off the internet, right? Which is probably already happening. But,
the Potomac flooded so much in 1936 that the Capitol was at risk.
Wow.
That hasn't happened. It's today.
Yeah.
Take a look at this. This week in 1936, much of eastern U.S. was underwater.
Wow.
This is
downtown
that's
Pittsburgh.
Take a look at downtown Pittsburgh.
Wow.
All Eastern America under floodwaters. March 20th, 1936. Terrible dust storm rages in the West. So we have the Dust Bowl happening, and where there is no water, the water will fall elsewhere. We have deluge somewhere else. The same thing is happening right now.
And the Capitol is actually flooded at this time.
So history is not a mystery. It repeats itself. And this is what the mainstream media doesn't want to tell you, is what I just told you. It's even though it's been hot in the South, look at Texas. Half of the state is above normal in red, but the northern part of the state is at record low temperatures, 10 degrees below normal. And some places in southern Illinois are 15 degrees below normal, but they're not writing articles on the record cold in the center of the U.S. They're not. They're hounding us on how hot it is in the desert in the summer. It's complete insanity.
Well,
It's
not to mention too that
desert.
like for maps like this, the color coding has changed, right? Like the reds and oranges are they're much brighter and blazing than they used to be, because it gives that impression of like, oh my God, it's burning up over here. Like that's not an accident. That's done on purpose.
On purpose. And the garbage science continues. New study, I shared this last night. New study, what are they attacking for the last year? Gas stoves. They just banned pizza ovens in New York.
Yeah.
And this study says that gas stoves spew more benzene and are more dangerous than secondhand smoke. And that's why we need to ban all gas stoves. The only problem with this study is it's not based in reality. Because if you go look into the medical history, there's not a single death that has been attributed to a gas stove in the history of the world.
Yeah, you know, somebody, I think at the Heartland Institute, I think, pointed out that if gas stoves were really that dangerous, then basically like all chefs would have severe health problems or all be dying early, and that's not happening.
Yeah, so someone is lying, and there is definitely an agenda. Because when we have a few tornadoes in the spring, they say that it's climate change, it's getting worse. No, it isn't. This is the annual strong, violent tornadoes in the U.S. since 1954. And in fact, in 2019, it was the lowest recorded in history for the year. So there is no trend here. Well, there's a trend.
It's
downward.
Yes. And isn't this the same for hurricanes? Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is global major hurricane frequency. This is of any magnitude. And there is 2 data points here. The U.S. is the gray and the world is the blue. And you can see a slight trend down since the 80s.
Very slight. Yeah. But it's certainly not up. That's for sure.
Right. And then this is the global tropical cyclone accumulated energy. This would be the strongness of the storms. There is no trend in the strength of hurricanes. There was a peak in the 90s and in 2006. So there were some strong peaks in hurricanes. Be interesting to compare this to the solar cycle and see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Maybe some solar storms are adding energy to these storms.
Right. But obviously, like, yes, there are some periods where there's some high peaks, but then there's also periods where there's low peaks. So, and there's no trend here. Zero
trend.
Yeah.
So is there a climate It's your guess. What is your let's sum this
What
up.
is my
We've got
guess?
9
It's not a
minutes.
guess. It's obviously no.
I think that there's a science emergency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's God, how many times have I said that in this show? The state of science is just an absolute disaster at this point.
I think we should this is the most important graph that we can share with the world. So if we were doing a march on this or doing some activism, you would need to get this graph into the hands of all the alarmists in the world. At first, they wouldn't believe it. And then they would double check that these are all credible sources, like the International Disaster Database. They don't have an agenda. So there is no trend up here because this is based on facts, not feelings.
I mean, ideally, yeah, if you showed this to the climate alarmists and they actually looked at the data, they'd be like, oh, however, these people are completely brainwashed. It's like the Stop Oil activists I was talking about earlier, who, they think that they're stopping traffic in order to save lives, but what they're actually doing is harming people. Like, the baby that needed to get to the hospital. Like, so there's no thought going on there. There's no objectivity. There's no analysis. There's no critical thinking whatsoever. It's just like, I'm brainwashed and I'm doing this and I'm not going to stop, even though there's this baby that I'm preventing getting to the hospital. It's completely insane.
Yeah, these climate activists are polluting the planet with paint that is created through the oil and gas industry. They're dumping literally oil on the roads to create accidents, harming people while polluting the environment. They're not helping anything.
Well, I mean, think about this too. It is
the most oxymoronic type of activism I have ever seen.
Yeah. And not only that, when you're stopping or slowing traffic, you're helping to have more emissions into the atmosphere. Like, hello? Like, are you that dumb?
So it's a very sad state we are for the world. It's not just the United States.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing is that this brainwashing only affects about 20% of the population of Earth, because only 20% can get this type of brainwashing material in front of their eyes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, only less than 20% of the Earth uses the internet. The majority of the people don't have technology, don't have electricity. They don't have newspapers. They don't have propaganda machines. Mm-hmm. And what is happening is that the small amount of people who populate the earth and burn all the fossil fuels are being controlled through a narrative. Mm-hmm. They want to kill off the population, but not necessarily us, the ones that consume the propaganda. They're trying to kill off the 80% that have no idea that they're about to starve to death.
Right.
And then their mission will be complete.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So I would recommend all of you to stay away from Climate Reanalyzer or any of the data here. And just like you were saying earlier, they've changed the colors on these maps, but a lot of articles are coming out where the people are picking up on the ruse now. What do you think the percentage of that is? Is it like 5-10% that are starting to figure out the Earth isn't probably burning up? It's just
I don't know. I find that very hard to gauge because, typically the things that I'm looking at or watching involve viewers that are already sort of out of the brainwashing arena. And so but I do see more and more people kind of going, oh, I used to think this, and now I realize that it's a bunch of BS. I mean, I kind of feel like the more that this stuff is pushed and the more that dumb things are taken away, like gas stoves or pizzerias or whatever it might be, because when you make a move like that, it doesn't make sense. It's such a small piece of the pie, and I think most people can recognize that like if you truly have concerns about emissions, like gas stoves versus automobiles that burn gas or diesel, it's like, duh, like which of those things is a bigger impact? Like why are we focused on gas stoves suddenly?
Well, and then again, only a small portion of the population even use gas stoves, and a single death has been attributed to gas stoves.
Right. Well, but they're accounting for that by putting out these other narratives about, like, they're claiming that it's responsible for some significant percentage of childhood asthma, which in and of itself doesn't even make sense, right? Asthma is an allergic reaction. It's not a reaction to particulates. It's an allergic reaction. So that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, they're making it up at this point.
Yeah.
And
I think that
they're wrong. Oh, go ahead.
The models are wrong, and I think that they're struggling to convince people, but they're going to continue to try, and it will be forced on us, I think, no matter how we react. So it's going to be pretty interesting going forward, I think. Because, like I said in the beginning of the show, I don't think most people are going to stand for whatever limitations are going to be placed on us.
And that wraps up the show. Love you guys. Please rewatch this tonight on Magnetic Reversal News. Or you can give us a thumbs up and some support, as we will probably be demonetized.
See you at 8 p.m.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction.